Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Right Guys podcast, and today we just show you that the administration lies and lies and lies and lies. And now your hosts, Josh Hammerling and Max McGuire.
Welcome back. Happy Monday. My name is Max McGuire here with Mr. Producer Josh Hammerling. I thought we could put this to bed on Friday. This question of whether or not FEMA is spending money on illegal aliens at a time that they claim they're out of money for Americans. Mm-hmm. This is not my word for it. It's Joe Biden's word for it, saying they're out of money. Democrats in Congress saying they're out of money, demanding that Congress go back into session to approve more money for disaster relief. I have no problem with approving money for disaster relief. It rings really hollow, the claims that, we can't do anything because we're out of money, when the people saying they're out of money for Americans are spending like absolute drunken sailors, sending this money overseas as fast as possible. Josh, after we got off on it was Saturday. She said this Saturday. Kamala Harris sent out a tweet, and I have updates to get the tweets. I was like, oh wow, this is a pretty long tweet. I bet you she's announcing new aid for North Carolina. Or I bet you she's announcing more aid for Georgia or South Carolina or an area affected by the hurricane. Or maybe it's a tweet about the new hurricane that's brewing in the Gulf of Mexico that's slated to hit Florida, which apparently it's already Category 4, which is terrifying.
5, according to Fox, right before I got on the air, as it's getting bigger. Like this thing is.
The good news is it looks like it's going to scrape the Yucatan Peninsula, and if that happens, it should shed a little bit of its power. But I mean, it's terrifying. I don't know if I've ever seen a hurricane form in that part of the Gulf of Mexico and just head straight east for Florida. I don't think I've ever seen that before. Maybe people can say that it's happened before. Usually I seem to remember it going up usually after that, but we're not going to get into conspiracy theories.
Yeah. There's no such thing as weather modification until we knows otherwise.
Yeah. I like Donald Trump's plan. What if we just nuke it? that was his question.
Mr. President, like that one, you got to be, Mr. President, that's going to be a no.
He asked the best questions. Now, listen, they tried that. They tried that years ago, not with nukes, but with large bombs. And the problem is when you create shrapnel, all you end up doing is putting shrapnel into the vortex, and that just hits people. But it is conceivable you could put a mother of all bombs in the middle of one of these things and might be able to disrupt it. But anyway, looking on social media, Kamala Harris makes this post. I'm like, it must be about Americans. She's going to rise to the occasion, help the American people. Mm-hmm. No, it was a post about how she and Biden had approved $157 million of new assistance to Lebanon. Now, I lived in Lebanon for a summer. Lebanon's near and dear to my heart. It's terrible that Hezbollah has chosen to use human shields and has chosen to operate in civilian buildings and has caused devastation. But it rings so hollow to hear, we're out of money for Americans. But, by the way, here's $157 million for Lebanon. By the way, not our closest ally.
No.
Not our closest ally whatsoever. By the way, Hezbollah is one of the leading political parties in Lebanon. And by the way, when you give money and assistance to Lebanon, much of it ends up going to Hezbollah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about this on the show before. What happens when the UN went into Palestine and was putting down water infrastructure? Hamas dug up the pipes and turned them into rockets.
Who's asleep at the wheel and their campaign when they're willing to put a tweet out that says we're going to help out Lebanon without the stroke of a pen, and we've got nothing left for Americans? Like it can't be. This has got to be the worst decision ever made during a political year. And if it's not the worst decision made, then somebody is purposefully kind of putting out these tweets to show their disdain, because at this point it feels like disdain for the American people, not like complete ignorance, right? Or she's not capable of doing her job. She's making sure that terrorist organizations get their money first. I mean, That's just what's
What
happening.
is the point? Honestly, what is the point on this 1-year anniversary of the October 7th attacks? What is the point of giving Israel weapons if the minute that they use them, we just start dumping money into the countries that get hit?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's a meme that's been floating around on social media, and it stings.
Yeah.
On the one side, you have the rockets being fired from Palestine. Now, the other side, you have the interceptors from Israel, and it says my tax dollars. And for the other rockets, it also says somehow also my tax dollars. I mean, this is what it's like. And so there's plenty of, when it comes to giving Israel bombs, there's plenty of money giving to give to Palestine and Lebanon to clean up after Israel uses the American funded bombs. But there's just never anything for the American people. And it's always, oh, we're out of money. It's always, oh, we need to go back to Congress. Oh, our hands are tied. I'm so sorry. And you brought up a clip with Ducey in the White House press briefing. I hadn't seen it right before air. It's stunning. Do you want to set it up?
Yeah. Ducey sitting there kind of giving the business to KJP, asking why there's immediate funds for Lebanon, but there's still nothing that hasn't been done for the American people. And KJP's answer is, well, it's odd. It's
information.
It's just odd. Yeah. And you got to watch it. You got to feel this one. You'll see.
Here's the clip.
Issue of funding. The administration has money to send to Lebanon without Congress coming back. But Congress does have to come back to approve money to send to people in North Carolina. Do I have that right?
Here's what I'm going to be very clear about. The president and the vice president has had a robust whole of government response to this. Hundreds of millions of dollars. I said it at the top, more than $200 million that we have directly put towards survivors here for disaster help. And that's because of this president's commitment to make sure that we are there for communities that are impacted. We take this very seriously again. We take this very seriously. And before the hurricane.
I want to pause it real quick because the over 200 million is still a little more than half of the total assistance that the U.S. has given to Lebanon in the last year. So when she's bragging about the 200 million, it's barely more than the 157 million we're sending them now, and a little bit more than half of the 385 million we've sent them over the past year. Here we
go. We pre-positioned more than 1,500 federal folks on the ground to help, and so we have made sure that every state has gotten their storm requested emergency declaration. They requested it, and we made sure they received it. We've taken this very seriously. More than $200 million that we have provided to the impacted areas. But instead, people want to do disinformation, misinformation, which is dangerous. Because then when folks on the ground hear that, they may not want to ask for the help that they need. That is there for them. Totally. That is there for them. That's our focus here.
But President Biden is fond of saying, show me your budget and I will tell you what you value. If he's got money for people in Lebanon right now, without Congress having to come back, what does it say about his values? There's not enough money right now for people in North Carolina who need it. That's not misinformation.
Wait, no, that is your whole premise of the question is misinformation, sir. What you do? Yes, it's misinformation.
Is there money to send to Lebanon right now?
I just mentioned to you that we provided more than $200 million to folks who are impacted in the area, and I just shared with you that people are deciding not to. People are deciding not to.
Wait. To Congress that there's not enough money to help people.
We're talking about the SBA disaster loan.
That's money for people in North Carolina,
and that's important. And people in North Carolina need that. Wait, this is nothing new. Peter, this is nothing new. Congress comes together, they provide money, millions of dollars, for disaster relief. We're asking them to do the job that they have been doing for some time.
From a letter that President Biden sent to Johnson, McConnell, Schumer, and Jeffries. The president's letter is not misinformation. Would you agree?
No, the way you're asking me the question is misinformation.
This is
There's
getting
money
dangerous.
that we are allocating to the impacted areas, and there's money there to help people who truly need it. There are survivors who need the funding, who need the funding, and it's there.
That you don't like misinformation.
I said that, I actually said we have the money available to help survivors of Hurricane Helene and also Hurricane Milton. Now, there's going to be a shortfall, right? Because we don't know how bad it's
Oh, here we go.
There's gonna be a shortfall.
Here we go.
And so we're going to need additional funding. We're going to need additional funding.
Well, where's
They
Congress?
never need. Oh, by the way, she runs out.
Provide extra assistance, extra funding to disaster
yeah.
relief fund. That's
Can't
what
have
Congress needs to do, and we're going to continue to urge that. You may not want that, but that's okay. That's what this president wants, and that's what the vice president wants. Thanks, everybody.
Ooh,
It's not
testy
what
at the
people
end.
need. Right. Well, first off, man, they've gotten to the point where they're willing to label anything against what they're saying as misinformation. And we had Kerry coming out last week saying the biggest problem with misinformation is that the First Amendment's in the way. Right. I mean, you can just taste their hatred for hard-hitting questions that expose the truth.
Yeah. No, I mean, what's that? There's a meme of Hitler riding down a rainbow, and it says, everything I don't like is Hitler, the emotionally immature's guide to argumentation, whatever it is. I mean, this is what their new thing is. It's misinformation. It's misinformation. Misinformation. Misinformation is balls and strikes, right? It's raining or it's not, right? It's night or it's daytime. Those are facts. Subjectively, what Peter Ducey is saying is absolutely correct, right? At a time when the White House is warning we're out of money, we don't have enough money to send, it's ridiculous that with the stroke of a pen, with Congress isn't in session, they can just send all this money overseas. This is the Lebanon one. Over the weekend, they also sent a huge tranche of money, which we talked about, to Taiwan. So they're able to do this, but when it comes to helping the American people, there's just never any left over. Yeah. And I mean, KJP got a little testy in that zoot suit. There was also another exchange earlier on where she was challenged about the funding. How is it that you're out of funding or running out of funding for Americans, but you still have money to dole out to illegal aliens? Yeah. And if you'll remember, I mean, we can play the clip from last week. She said it was categorically false. Yes. Categorically false. Yes. To insinuate that FEMA was spending money on illegal aliens.
Administration of using FEMA funding to support undocumented migrants. How is the White House responding to that?
I mean, it's just categorically false. It is not true. It is a false statement. And look, the fact.
So, categorically false, crazy. Right? Yeah. The problem is, it's well documented. Like, they were bragging about this, Josh. A couple years ago, they were bragging about how FEMA was on the ground to help with the illegal alien migrant crisis, right? Yeah. It wasn't a crisis, but still FEMA was doing it. Yeah. And they had all of these nice headlines. All these nice headlines from back in the day. Yeah. Department of Homeland Security, FEMA announces $380 million in additional funding to communities receiving migrants. DHS announces distribution of more than $77 million in congressional funding for communities receiving migrants. Department of Homeland Security announces distribution of $12 million in funding for migrants. $110 million from the Emergency Food and Shelter Program to assist migrants. New York City, expensive. New York City to get $104.6 million from FEMA for asylum seekers. Department of Homeland Security announces $300 million in direct funding to communities receiving migrants, and $340 million for a new competitive awards process, which is what we talked about on Friday. Wow. Yeah. The most damning here is right here at the top. I'll zoom in. FEMA awards $110 million from the Emergency Food and Shelter Program
to assist migrants. Now, would that be the same program where we would take in food for people who've been hit by a hurricane, or those wonderful tents that we'd be able to set up so people can have a dry place to sleep? Is that the same money you're telling me here? Because that's making me so pissed off now that, like, I don't know why we don't have the pitchforks out, right? And that the torches are being carried in the streets.
So there's some of the money here that's discretionary. There's some of the money here that the administration can pick and choose how it wants to distribute it. The FEMA Emergency Food and Shelter Program is something that doesn't just have money sitting in it for all time, but money will get moved into it as there's a need, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Congress approves a total funding, and there's a certain amount of FEMA's funding that's for administrative things, things like that. And then there's also disaster relief and response, right? So the FEMA Emergency Food and Shelter Program sits under the disaster relief and response side of FEMA's budget. So money will get moved into that specific program as there's a need, as people are hungry, as people need shelter. That is precisely, you hit the nail on the head. That is precisely the program that would be used to help people after a hurricane whose house just washed down the river, right? So if people need housing, they would go to FEMA's Emergency Food and Shelter Program to try and get some vouchers for local hotels, right? If they're hungry and there's no access to food banks, right? They might go through that program to get food if it happens to be on the ground. That program would pay for the food that would be set up at FEMA relief sites. When FEMA instead uses $110 million into that program and directs it towards illegal aliens, that is 100% relief money being redirected towards illegal aliens. There is no way around that, Josh. There's no way around it.
But then how can she go in front of the American people and say the category denies and it's all lies that she didn't do it? I mean, I was trying to find 9 News the day that she put it out there, had all these stories saying no, money did not go to migrants. It should be going to people in the Carolinas. I can't find it now because that's magically disappeared from the pages, right? I'm just, how can she do that? How can she, with a straight face, keep going up there and telling the American people that they have misspent their money?
It's a technicality. So on a technical level, she's right? Because what she's debunking a statement that no one made, right? People aren't saying that money that was supposed to go to North Carolina was instead diverted to illegal aliens. That's not what happened, because the money can't be earmarked for North Carolina until after the storm, right?
Mm-hmm.
So technically,
wow,
it wasn't redirected from North Carolina to illegal aliens. What's more accurate is that the money that's supposed to go to the American people and to legal residents who are victims of storms was instead rerouted, right? But that's the technicality, because it can't be rerouted if it's never earmarked to begin with, which is what happens with this Emergency Food and Shelter Program.
So on paper,
money gets put into it as they need it, right? So what she's trying to debunk is not what's happening, right? If they had put money into the Emergency Food and Shelter Program for North Carolina and then turned around and said, actually, we're going to give this to illegal aliens, that would be the debunking that she's describing. That's not what they did, right? They put money into the program to give it to illegal aliens. And now that there's Americans in need, they don't have enough of that discretionary relief money to put into that program anymore.
Unbelievable mismanagement of our country. This is the biggest waste. I mean, it's just not even waste at this point. It's making sure that they're giving away the things that we put aside to help our own and giving it to others who don't deserve it. And I'm tired of the border thing. Like, these people do not belong here. Like, I'm ready to close that whole thing down, because the only thing I'm worried about is Americans and us being able to take Americans and seeing what they can do with this cash. And it becomes discretionary, right? And then on paper, it looks good. While you're telling me all those things, I'm just sitting there thinking, well, on paper, it looks like they're telling the truth. On paper, they can make this statement, right? But we all know that they squandered the help. They've squandered our help.
Yeah. And like, here's the other thing. We all know that there's not a real appropriations process in Congress. The way it's supposed to work is each of these departments and agencies are supposed to go to a committee or subcommittee with hat in hand with their proposed budget, how much money they say they need, explaining what they need it for, what they want to give it for. Congress will then redline it and decide what they want to appropriate.
Wow.
It'll go, the committees will do that. It'll go up to the House. They'll pass it, go up to the Senate, pass it. President will sign it. That's not happening in Congress anymore. Instead, what happens is they're funding the government year after year through continuing resolutions. So continuing resolution, all that says is, okay, we're going to fund the government at the same level we did last year, maybe a little bit more for inflation, right? So if FEMA got $30 billion last year, maybe they'll get $30.5 billion this year, right? That's how that continuing resolution, sometimes it's the exact same amount, sometimes they adjust for inflation and tack up a little bit more. The way you know the Biden administration's lying is that every year they have set aside more and more money for illegal aliens. The amount of money they've set aside for illegal aliens this year was more than last year, which was more than the year before that, which was more than the year before that. So Congress isn't significantly increasing FEMA's funding. FEMA isn't going to Congress asking for an appropriations package that lays out each of its spending priorities. Instead, Congress is saying, okay, we'll give you the same amount of money as last year. And what is FEMA doing behind the scenes? They're taking that money and they're divvying it up. And each year that Biden's been in office, they've set aside more and more money for illegal aliens. Now, it's not something that Congress told them to do, but it's something that they're doing. So when you finally remember, because we're at the end of we're in the beginning of the next fiscal year, right?
Fiscal year, yeah.
So that fiscal year's over. We're in the beginning of the next fiscal year. We're on a continuing resolution right now. Remember, because there's all this talk about government shutdowns and whatnot. That's because Congress hasn't passed the year-long appropriations package. So we're on borrowed money. Okay, we'll just give them the same amount of money as last time, right?
Wow.
So behind the scenes, FEMA's the one that's deciding, okay, well, this is an emergency. Our job is to take care of emergencies. So the migrants are an emergency. So we're going to take this money and dole it out to them, right?
Yeah.
But money, it's a zero-sum game. Right? FEMA has limited dollars, and for every dollar that they give to one person, they can't then give it to another person in need. So they're supposed to pick and choose, and they're supposed to give it to everyone who needs it, right? But amazingly, just like every other facet of government services, when you just have an influx of millions and millions of illegal aliens, it strains the budget. It's why hospitals our lines are out the door, unable to take care of people. Prices are rising because illegal aliens aren't paying, right? It's why schools are out of control, where you have kids in these classes now in rural areas, suburban areas. There's so many migrants there. They don't all speak the same language. It's just chaos, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a surprise. This has done the same thing to FEMA. It's done the same thing to FEMA. And if KJP was honest, she would remember that back in September of 2022, she was bragging about FEMA using money on illegal aliens.
Categorically full. No, Biden did not take FEMA relief
This first part's
money
from last
to
week.
use on migrants. So FEMA regional administrators have been meeting with city officials on site to coordinate available federal support from FEMA and other federal agencies. Funding is also available through FEMA's emergency food and shelter program to eligible local governments and non-for-profit organizations upon request to support humanitarian relief for migrants.
And there it is. There it is. The exact thing I was just talking about, how FEMA put money into this program that's supposed to give people housing and food after natural disasters. They raided it. They took the money and they put it in there, and they are giving it to cities and towns at the southern border so that they can feed the illegal aliens. I mean, you can't make it up. And Josh, here's the amazing thing. Here's the amazing thing, right? This isn't like we have to use it or lose it, right? FEMA's not one of those agencies. There's a lot of government agencies that you have to use it or lose it, where I used to know someone who has since passed away, but he was a contractor in the DC area. And what he would tell me, the stories he would tell me were crazy. Like, he'd get called to the same government agency every year, and his job would be to take down the flagpole and put up a new one. Because if they didn't do it by the end of the fiscal year, they lose that funding next year.
For that. Yeah.
So every year on the dot, he was putting in a new flagpole. He was putting in a new cast iron steel gate at the entrance, right? Buying new chairs. Every year they do it. With FEMA, Congress isn't going to say to FEMA, okay, you have $100 million left in your emergency fund. We're going to claw that back. Congress doesn't do that because Congress understands that the fiscal year ends in September and hurricane season runs through November. They're not going to claw that money back. So that money, I mean, it's unlikely that money from 2022 would still be there today, but it would have been there to help people last year.
Yeah.
Right. And it rolls over, right? Every dollar that's still in the account can help people even more. It's undeniable that they've taken money that would have otherwise gone to Americans, and they're lying and trying to cover it up.
Yeah, and in an election year. And I know all those really expensive hotel rooms in Denver where they're putting the migrants weren't free. I mean, where was that money coming from? The exact same thing that we're talking about here, right? That's where it all came from. So if you're a sanctuary city, thank you. You took most of that money that we could have used to helping Americans, and you housed a bunch of migrants in hotels, most likely displacing your local homeless in the meantime, right? So kudos to you. If that was your plan, you did it. Bravo. But we see it for what it is. You know what I mean? They salivated at the prospect of being able to bring in these folks and giving them everything, right? Giving them the $1,500 a month on a card for whatever you may need. That cell phone when they cross the border, right? All in a box, ready to go. Here you go. Here's your little bag. It probably came in a beautiful little bag, right? From the Democratic Party. Probably said that somewhere on there. I'm making that up. I'm not sure, but that's how I feel.
Well, the money has to come from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of court cases, and I write about this in my book, but there are a lot of court cases where over the years, like Texas has tried to say, okay, we are not going to let illegal aliens into our school system. It is a drain on our society. We can't afford it. And the courts have consistently said, it's not that much money. You can handle it, right? So that's been the legal argument forcing Texas to provide emergency medical care, to provide
that's insane.
Like
don't
school,
they know how much it costs to run the schools?
Yes.
Spend billions on it every year.
Yes.
Billions.
I laid out in my book just how many billions and billions and billions of dollars. It's astronomical.
Oh, unbelievable.
It is comical. And one of the reasons that I actually supported Greg Abbott doing this, busing illegal aliens to places, like Denver, busing them to New York, busing them to Chicago and Boston, is that when it was Texas's obligation to take care of these people, the answer was always, it's not that much money, just you can handle it.
Yeah.
But the minute the first busload arrived in New York City, they declared a state of emergency.
Yeah.
For the first bus, Josh, for the first bus.
Eric Adams knew.
Yeah, we can handle it apparently. But the minute we send one Greyhound full to New York City, they're like, oh my God, this is terrible. The logistics, who's going to feed them? Who's going to house them? Who's going to educate them? Who's going to give them health care? Right? Who's going to help them find a job? And we're all sitting back and we're like, we've been talking about this for decades.
Yeah.
And I say this collectively because I was here for decades. Yeah.
Even the 70s, right? Like this was on the table on the border states. And it's just like the budget, right? They've been kicking that down the road over and over and over. Isn't it beautiful to have a system where our form of government doesn't even have to come up with a budget? So we don't even know what we're spending. And when we do need the money for real situations, we've somehow blown it all and it's not there.
There's a story that's starting to break, which is, it's not completely on topic, but I have to mention it.
Yeah.
People's Medicare Part D, which is one of the Medicare plans, is set to jump up in price just after the election.
Wow.
The allegation being made currently is that in order to pay for the electric vehicle tax credits that were in the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, the Biden-Harris administration raided the Medicare fund to pay for the EV tax credits, and there's no money left in the Medicare fund.
No.
So people's costs are about to triple, quadruple, quintuple, and it should have already happened. But they're playing games with the accounting to hold off until after the election.
Unbelievable.
So people's Medicare Part D expenses won't quadruple, quintuple until after the election. It should have already happened. They stole from Medicare. Should have already happened. People I mean, in some cases, Josh, we're literally talking about $20 a month going up to $100 a month.
Which is crazy because even if they win, they'll try to hide the fact that they did it. And if they lose, they'll just say Donald Trump immediately raised prices on day one, right?
Exactly.
Oh,
so we have an administration.
Politics.
Yeah, we have an administration that's taking money away from the fund that's supposed to be helping Americans after hurricanes, giving it to illegals, taking money away from the Medicare fund, giving it to EV, which is that's literally just a bailout for car companies, right?
Yeah.
The Biden administration told car companies you have to manufacture a certain percentage of your fleet every year has to be electric vehicles. And to incentivize that, we're going to give tax rebates, right? So it's just funneling it into the Green New Deal. I mean, everything is being stolen, and they're picking the winners and losers. And wake up, people. We're all the losers in this.
Yeah.
Unless you're an illegal alien or an electric car manufacturer, you're the loser here.
Yeah. And it's going to continue because this is just the beginning. Imagine when all of it starts to come to fruition and there's 20 extra million people that have crossed the border, right? When your streets are so unsafe, you won't be able to tell the difference between Denver and pick your place in South America City, because there will be that much crime. There will be that much people. And your taxes, you think they're high now? Imagine what happens when they have to start taxing you to fix the national debt and the extra 20 million people that have come across the border. I mean, it's going to be like a 51% tax rate game. They might even start trying to tax wealth because there won't be enough income. Imagine what that'll do.
What I was just talking about with the Medicare premium. Biden-Harris administration using taxpayer money to mask Medicare premium hikes before the election. The program is in a death spiral. Now, the investigation that's now being launched is why until after the election? Why is it conveniently? Why did you move the shell game just enough money to stop these price hikes until right after the election? That's a violation of the Hatch Act. That's using the federal government for a political purpose, right? Something they always accuse Donald Trump of doing every time he opened his mouth.
And here we have Biden-Harris doing it.
Here we have it. So it's getting really hard to, with a straight face, accept the lies from this administration. I mean, Mandy in the comment section just mentioned that the money that they're actually sending North Carolina is small business loans. Oh, congratulations, it's a loan, right? I guarantee you,
it's not relief. Yeah,
I guarantee you that Lebanon's not being loaned that money. Taiwan's not being loaned the hundreds of millions of dollars they're getting.
You think Ukraine's going to pay a cent back?
I mean, if they were smart, they would. If they were smart, they would, right? Because at least when we gave weapons and equipment to Britain, we did it under the guise of lend-lease, right? So we were supposed to get money back. Now we absolved those debts for the most part after the war to be nice neighbors. But there's no reason you have to do that, right? I mean, if we wanted Ukraine to be a territory of the United States, we could. We have the leverage, right?
Sure.
But you'll notice we're getting nothing. We're getting nothing in return except for giving Lindsey Graham that tingly feeling of knowing that a Russian's blowing up somewhere on the battlefield thanks to his actions. We never do anything for ourselves. It's always just helping other people. When Americans actually need the help, they actually need the money. I'm sorry, they say their hands are tied. And you'll notice KJP today in the press conference got very hyper technical with her clarification of saying that money has not been diverted from North Carolina to illegal aliens.
Disaster relief, this is a falsehood. Disaster relief funds used on immigrants illegally in the U.S. The fact is, no money is being diverted from response needs. That's the fact.
Again, that's not what we're saying. We're saying that FEMA at the beginning of the year gets a certain amount of money. And the expectation is when there's a natural disaster, they'll kind of funnel that money towards the people who need it. For the past 3 years, FEMA has been taking money that otherwise would have gone to hurricane response and giving it to towns and cities to help them feed, clothe, and house illegal aliens. So the claim isn't that it's diverted. The claim is that the money could never go to North Carolina because they already spent it.
It's just, we're hiding behind technicalities.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Hiding behind technicalities to keep supporting the lie. And I think that's the worst part about it is that they keep just wanting to perpetuate lies. I mean, they're not even, they don't care that they're lying anymore.
No,
and that's
they
the
really
danger.
don't.
That's the danger to this whole thing, right? They are purposefully obfuscating the truth on every avenue they have, just so they can keep power. That's what you're voting for if you vote for them. That's what you're keeping in power if you're supporting them. You can't vote for this, gang. You can't.
The other part of this story is that FEMA, in addition to being repurposed to take care of illegal aliens, FEMA was also one of the agencies that was tasked with doling out COVID-19 relief dollars.
Oh my God. I remember that.
All of these programs that we've talked about, like that money never got spent. That money never got, that seems like it was laundered somewhere. What the hell's going on? FEMA has had its mission diluted, right? Instead of just being the people that, okay, hurricane, tornado, earthquake, we're there. So, oh no, actually, you're the ones who are going to be feeding illegal aliens now. Oh, by the way, you're the ones who are going to be doling out COVID-19 stimulus. So not only has the money been diverted in different places, but their focus has been diluted.
Yeah.
Right? FEMA didn't double in size. Right? No, it's still roughly the same size as it was a couple of years ago, but it has all of these other jobs.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the jobs, Josh, I shit you not, one of the jobs is to educate. I couldn't believe this when I saw this. FEMA is setting up webinars to educate nonprofits and cities and towns. Cities and towns, you know, that this shelter program I was just talking about?
Yeah.
They held a webinar where they warned about the dangers of misgendering the illegal aliens that are getting the government subsidized housing.
Leo mentioned there were those conversations, not only with migrant trans women. Being a migrant trans woman, there is an undocumented concern.
Undocumented concern.
Because of the way they've been responded to in the past. Then if they are accepted, what would happen in terms of misgendering, in terms of bedrooms and bathrooms, etc. And then in addition.
Did you hear that? Did it cut out in the middle? Did you hear it?
I heard it came back.
The concern that they had was that if they divert the money, and this person, I can't even tell if this is a man or woman. It looks like this person checks off boxes in each column. Because I can't tell. I generally can't tell.
Yeah.
The director of education and training for FEMA's Pride, Federal Employee Resource Group. This is insane. This is insane. So they're worried that they have this money, right? When there's a natural disaster, the shelter and food relief program.
Yeah.
Will go to like homeless shelters, organizations that are already built to house people.
Yeah.
Does it make sense, right?
Yeah.
When everyone is without a house, you give the money to the people whose bread and butter is to help people who have no home and put a roof over their head.
Yeah.
What this person is saying is that they are worried if it goes to the faith-based organizations that are already running these shelters, then those faith-based organizations might not toe the line on respecting the rights of the trans migrants, the trans illegal aliens. Meaning, if it's a man in a skirt, they're not going to let him stay in the women's shelter. For good reason, because you don't let men in the women's shelter, because many of the women in those women's shelters are running away from abusive men.
That's what they're focusing on?
That's a focus.
The world is on that's the world's on fire.
Yep.
Part of the United States is underwater and destroyed, and there's more bad weather coming, and this is one of the focuses of FEMA.
Yeah,
I could care less about how you identify when things have hit the fan. Nobody gives a shit what gender you are when you are thirsty. Nobody gives a crap what gender you are when you're hungry, right?
No,
they don't give a crap about you when they need a place to sleep.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, this is how, beyond just the money for illegal aliens, beyond we're going to handle COVID. This is the crap that's infected FEMA. We talked about it earlier, the equity, their strategic plan for the next year. 1.1 of their strategic plan is to dole out equity. We were like, what does that look like? This is what that looks like. Them saying, okay, we need to dole out money for shelter, but we want to make sure that we're going to dole it out to homeless shelters that will let the men sleep next to the women. This is actually also just a roundabout way to discriminate against Catholic and faith-based nonprofits.
Right. The ones who are already equipped for this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So why would you do such a thing? Why would you also, a faith-based group is allowed to do this sort of things. Just because you may agree what this lady says, there's other people who are allowed to not agree with it. Right. I mean, at what point did anybody lose the position that this is wrong? Right.
And what this person, again, I cannot tell if this is a he or she. I mean, it might be a woman in a toupee. I don't know. This person, to respond to what you just said, they have the right to do that. And this person would say, we also have the right not to include them in this housing grant.
Yeah.
Because that's how it works, right?
Yeah.
That's how it works. So that's what equity in FEMA looks like, right? The housing and the shelter and food grant only goes to the homeless shelters that are comfortable with men dressed in skirts sleeping in women's shelters. I mean, that's what the equity portion looks like, because they'd say that trans migrants are the most discriminated against everyone. So to be equitable, they cannot allow any of this money to go to Catholic charities or could go to this Baptist shelter, right? That's how this works.
And imagine being at the border and just making the claim that you're trying to come here because you're trans, and then suddenly the whole world opens up for you, right? Yeah. They give you everything, right? Everyone would be allowed to walk in over the border if that's the case too. I mean, that's where this is going. It's this is scary stuff.
100%. And this person is collecting a salary. I bet you that salary is substantial.
Oh, six figures plus. Yeah. I'm sure it's handsome.
Which would we rather have? Someone on a webinar concerned that the trans migrants are being misgendered, or have that money not given to a salary and given to someone in North Carolina or people in North Carolina to help them put food in their belly, to help them clothe themselves because their entire wardrobe is now floating down the river. I don't know if you saw what actually happened here. The river in some of these areas of North Carolina shifted.
Yeah.
So the reason that people lost everything is that the river shifted and went onto their property. I was looking at overheads, satellite images before and after. These people can't even rebuild because their property is now the river.
Yeah, it's underwater.
It's now the river.
It's it is the power of water. It'll always go to the path of least resistance. That's why it's a natural disaster. And of all the people that need to be rehoused and made whole again would be these people who have lost everything. That is why FEMA exists, or should exist. You know, Carter can't do it now, but where's Habitat for Humanity throwing up houses on tracts of land for people? Like, all the red tape that these folks will have to go through just to get this help. There's no help. Yeah. And they got to go through red tape to get it. Man, this is the perfect disaster movie. And it's playing out in real time.
Let me show this. I'm not going to play because there's music and I don't know if it's copyrighted. But here is, looks like it's a playground of some sort, right? Here's the before. Watch the after. How do you rebuild that playground when it's now a river?
You can't.
You just
gone.
This person's house, it's now a river. That one was kind of fast, hard to see. This person, whoever this is, I feel so bad for them, right? This is their house. It's a river now. You can't rebuild that house. It's a river. You can't. I mean, you can't. It's going to take a lot of money to redirect this river and to tell it to go a different direction. But like, that's the aerial footage. It's gone. This house right here, also a river now.
Well, you know what they'll say is you shouldn't have built your house so close to the original river, and that's your problem. You know, I think somebody did this exact same thing for Maui, right? For all of the
Yeah.
fire that happened.
Yeah.
And here we are, two major natural disasters in the Biden administration, his short 4 years. And what has the response been? We'll give you $450 for this. You guys will get $750, and that's all we can do for you.
Yeah.
That's all we got for you. There's, and it's just too much of a bother to get Congress back into session to make sure that they take your tax dollars and spend it on Lebanon and Hezbollah.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, it's infuriating. It's infuriating. Imagine coming home to see your house and it's gone. It's just a river. And then, okay, where's FEMA? Nowhere to be found.
I just start weeping. There'd be nothing.
And then you hear that, oh, I can get relief if I just go on the app. Well, I don't have electricity. My house is a river now. And I don't have Wi-Fi. Again, the river.
Yeah.
And okay, so let me get some Wi-Fi. Let me get Starlink. Oh, I can't because FEMA is actually threatening to arrest any of the private pilots trying to bring Starlink into my town. So I'm sorry, can't get onto the app to request the relief because Starlink is not allowed in because FEMA says no. Elon Musk talks to Pete Buttigieg. They make it work. They get Starlink in. Someone opens up their phone, sees, oh, all of this to get $750. They apply, and then they get rejected.
In the exact
it's a sick
moment
joke.
they apply. Yeah.
It's a sick joke.
I don't think you would call it a joke, but it's their disdain. This is how they've always felt about you. What did Ducey say at the start of his question? When you want to know, it's a Biden quote. When you want to know something about someone, you look at their budget, right? Because that's where they're putting their money. That's who they like. So they like everyone but Maui. They like everyone but the Carolinas, Georgia, anybody that's been impacted by Helene, right? Yeah. And we're facing another hurricane that could hit the west coast of Florida in Biden's time. Now, I think Florida will be okay because they've got a governor that knows what to do, but there won't be a FEMA response, gang. There can't be. I mean, they're completely broke. And now we have two major disasters and they're totally out of cash. Like, who's at the wheel here, right? Where's the president? Like, who's the one that's supposed to be calling the shots? Where's our quarterback?
Well, a quarterback is playing with cat toys somewhere or eating ice cream. We don't know, and we'll never know. Like we know Kamala Harris is doing. She's on a sex podcast. It's a sick joke. I laugh because that's the only way to respond to something like this, right? It's so obviously political. And then you hear people on the left salivating at the idea that, oh, now there won't be as many conservative votes in North Carolina, where all of these leftist organizations that are all about making sure there's drop boxes everywhere.
Yeah,
I haven't seen a single lawsuit filed from the Democrats to make sure that there are drop boxes in Asheville, to make sure that the mail-in ballots that people requested actually get to them.
Right. It's just gotten to the point where this can't be. I know I'm harping on this, but it can't be by accident. This has to be part of a plan. If they plan on making sure that you just can't get something when disaster does strike, their plan must always be to go after their enemies. I mean, that's the only plan I can think that Democrats have these days is destroy your enemies. And that may include the voting population that they consider their enemies. So, and it's just a disaster. They're using it. It's a useful tool. It's another Saul Alinsky playbook come true, right? Never let a disaster go to waste. In this case, you get to attack your political opponents just by making sure they don't have water and electricity. I mean, I could write a book like this, right? How many authors have we have on now that write these dystopian things? And then parts of them are like, whoa, this is weird. This is true, right? Or potentially true, or part of the playbook.
You're right. You're right. I have more clips. I don't want to play them. It's just the lies.
It's just
The
heartbreaking.
lies
Yeah.
of we're not giving money to illegal aliens. They are. We've documented. We've proven it beyond a reasonable doubt. Share this podcast.
Yeah.
Give a thumbs up. Like it. Follow the page you're watching it on. More people need to see us because the media is actually claiming that it isn't true when it absolutely 100% is true that money was doled out to illegal aliens. That if it wasn't, would be there right now for Americans. Before we end,
but real quick, I was going to say they're trying to save their political ass, but they won't save yours.
Yes,
from a hurricane.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you need to know. What are we going to say?
Anniversary of October 7th.
Mm-hmm.
Today, Donald Trump was paying respects at a synagogue today. I wanted to play Kamala Harris's response yesterday on 60 Minutes to a question, very simple question, asking if Netanyahu is our ally. And she refused to say it.
Have a real close ally in Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I think, with all due respect, the better question is, do we have an important alliance between the American people and the Israeli people? And the answer to that question is yes.
Yes.
That's interesting.
That's a non-answer answer? Yeah. I'll tell you what, she changed the question. She didn't even want to answer the question.
No, she changed the question. The question completely.
The preface was, do you have a friend? An ally in Israel? Is that in Netanyahu?
No, they're saying no. And so this is a question. This is a damned if you do, damned if you don't question for her.
Sure.
Because if she doesn't want to piss off the Jewish voters,
sure,
and she also doesn't want to piss off Muslim voters. I saw one poll out this weekend that 20 or 30% of Muslims in Michigan are not sure if they're going to vote for her at all, and like 30 or 40% have already said they're voting for Trump. So,
good Lord,
people on the ground are saying that they don't know a single person who's voting for Kamala Harris in the Muslim community in Dearborn, Michigan. Now, I'm sure there are going to be some.
Yeah. I mean, you'll have your down balloters like anybody.
But imagine how pissed off someone has to be to vote for Trump. Because Trump isn't a friend to Palestine, right?
No.
But they realize that she isn't either. Right? So at the very least, get someone who's going to help the economy. Right?
Yeah.
Right? At the very least.
Pretty much.
At the very least, do that. I saw that and I was just stunned. I was stunned at it.
I mean, if we were to really see those internal polls that they keep talking about, and we were really to see if they were underwater, I wonder how far underwater she is in some of her strongholds. Yeah. Especially when it comes to Michigan right now. Like, I would be shocked if she loses Michigan, but I won't be surprised if she does.
I wouldn't be shocked at all. I someone can fact check me on this, but I do believe that there has not been a time in the modern era where Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin have voted differently.
What about in Bush, first Bush, or second Bush?
I think they went the same. Did they?
Yeah.
2004.
Which, if just Pennsylvania and Michigan went red, I mean, do you really think Wisconsin would follow suit? I mean, there's a reason they call those like the big blue walls that show up, right? I mean,
2004 presidential election. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all in blue.
Oh, it did, yeah. It was the same in Obama.
Usually they make, here we go, 2000.
Well, Reagan Reagan had a landslide.
2000, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all blue.
Interesting.
96, all blue.
Yep.
92, all blue. 98. Okay, 98, Wisconsin.
Okay.
So that's the one that did it.
But still, that's a long time. We're talking
84, all
years.
red.
Yeah, because that was the Reagan.
80,
Carter
red.
was the only other one that I would have thought he didn't even win Georgia.
Carter is the other exception. So you gotta go back. 20, 30 years to find one where they don't all vote the same.
Well, think about all the industry there. Think about all the manufacturing. And I think JD Vance has really hit a tone with how much we've lost manufacturing. I think when people hear them talk about bringing jobs back, they believe them. And that's why we're seeing the crazy swings inside Teamsters unions, inside of big name unions that have said, you know what, we may not be on board with them anymore. I'm told the demographic change, culture changes too, if you think about it. So inside those groups, in order for that to happen. And it's always the economy, stupid. Carville said it best. I mean, he still denies it, but it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. Well, we're almost out of time. Do you have anything else? Any last word before we wrap up?
I always want to go into something that they're just coming after you, gang. They think they are something completely and totally different than you. Like they don't even worry about lying to you now, right? It's either toe the line or get out of the way, and they don't tolerate you anymore. If you're outside of the left and they're left think, you're not tolerated by them anymore. And they're coming for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, that's it for this edition of the podcast. If you like it, subscribe. We're on YouTube, Rumble, X. Subscribe to that. We also have the audio edition of the podcast. Everywhere you find audio podcast, subscribe. Even if you watch us live, please do subscribe. Help us with those numbers. That's it for this edition. My name is Max McGuire.
I'm Josh Hammerling.
Remember, the fight to take back our country is not over yet, but the only way we win is if we all stand up and fight together. See you next time.
See ya.